So good morning, good afternoon, depending on the time zone you all are joining in, and namaskar everyone. It is an indeed honor and delight to welcome and introduce Mr. Deepak Bagla, Managing Director and CEO Invest India. Mr. Bagla has a professional career of over 3 decades with the World Bank, Citibank, and private equity, having responsibilities across Europe, Africa, and Asia. He's currently the Managing Director and CEO of Invest India, the national investment promotion and facilitation agency promoted by the Government of India. Invest India is also the execution agency for Startup India and the Prime Minister's Science and Technology Initiative. Mr. Bagla is a member of several high-level government committees, including FinTech and Innovation. Mr. Bagla was on the investment committee for the government US $1.5 billion fund of funds for startups and is on the advisory board of the government $7 billion fund of funds for MSMEs. He is also a special invitee to the Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council. Mr. Bagla has a bachelor's degree with honors in economics from St. Stephen's College, New Delhi, and a dual master's in international diplomacy and international trade and finance from the School of Foreign Service, Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. He is the president of the Geneva-based World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies with membership of 105 countries. Mr. Bagla has been conferred Grand Official dell'Ordine della Stella d'Italia by the President of the Republic of Italy. I have now known him for over 2 decades, and to me, Mr. Bagla is a source of inspiration, a guide, and always to learn so much from him. He's an epitome of humbleness and just a call away for anyone who needs help. So, dear colleagues, please may I request you to unmute your mic and switch your videos on and join myself to welcome Mr. Deepak Bagla with a big round of digital applause.
Guys, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon, and at least for India time this afternoon. And Tarun, thank you for being so kind. At our age, it is nice to have people who are kind to you. But I must tell you that you really need to look at the right sources for inspiration. The one you're looking at is not really going to be very helpful. But I was speaking to Tarun in the morning when I was driving in, and I said, what should we be talking about? And he said, just a little about what happened during COVID and especially what happened to the team. But let me give you a quick introduction of Invest India so you all know where I'm coming from and where my thoughts are coming from. Essentially, startup of the Government of India, 2015, when the Honorable Prime Minister wanted to create an investment promotion agency for India, we didn't have one. It's rather ironic that even after the complexity with which you all have established your businesses here, we didn't have an agency to help you support and do that. So the first vertical which I work on is my investment promotion and facilitation. That is where we have a team which is dedicated, completely investor based. And for an investor, you get a dedicated relationship manager. They work with you right through showing you the opportunity in India, your India plans, getting you all approvals, and then staying with you right through your course through your journey in India. The second one, very interesting. 2016, you may remember, many of those who know India well, January 2016, Startup India was launched. And so we are a young startup nation in that way. And Invest India was given the responsibility to manage Startup India. That meant starting from finding a definition for what we would cost to everything else, creating the ecosystem, getting the entire activity going right from the states, the centers, the departments, everywhere. So that was very interesting. And why it was interesting, because in many ways, Invest India itself was a startup of the government. So it sort of gelled in very well. The third part is, as you mentioned, the Prime Minister's Science and Technology Initiative, where all innovation and R&D happening within the system. is being now brought in together. We join the dots and try and see how we can create a momentum and take it much closer to the entire process of actually taking it to industry and to make it actually happen. And the last part is digitization of the entire investor journey in India, including the approval processes and everything, and including the reporting, etc., and all those things. So these are the four essential verticals, and let me start with that. But what typically happened, we have a young team. The average age of my team is about 29, 30. Each one of them come from the top institutions across the globe. They all have consulting, investment banking, or sectoral domain expertise. And during COVID was the first time when we completely sort of, if you looked at it, totally pivoted what we were doing. So just 17 hours before the lockdown was announced, the team got together and said that something is going to happen. Let's see how we will keep businesses in their process of continuity during a process if there is a lockdown. That's how it all started. And 2 hours after the lockdown, they launched a portal called the Business Immunity Platform. Slowly, this portal morphed into 17 sub teams, starting from issuing of passes during a curfew and helping the government to do that, to finding companies to keep their supply chains going, especially essential commodities, to getting startups so that if you recollect, uh, on the 30th of March 2019, we didn't have any PPEs in India. By 30th July, we had enough PPEs not just for India, but also to export to Europe and other countries. So that was one of the things where the team was working relentlessly, picking up young startups who already had ideas and solutions, tying them up with larger corporates to get the manufacturing scalability happening, seeing that whatever essential supplies were required from across the globe. And that was the biggest challenge. I remember, and the team was working 24/7. We were trying to get some chemical material and the lining which is used in the masks, the middle lining which is required. And that had to come from one of the Eastern countries. Aircraft is there on the ground. One, they were not letting you test. They said, if you want it, pay now and take it. The prices were changing by the hour. It was difficult to order. We had aircrafts waiting there to be able to get it out. Logistics had to be created. And it was as challenging as that because I recollect in one of the instances, uh, our payment got delayed by about an hour and they refused to load it on our aircraft and loaded it onto another aircraft from another country because that country paid a 2x of that amount. We were in that challenging situation, even after having signed the contract with us. So the team was working overnight. But the most interesting thing I'll tell you, which happened there, I had the strength of my MSMEs. You see, in times of a crisis, you open the biggest opportunity doors for you. And yes, in many ways, it was the worst of times, but in many ways, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times because it was brutal for all of us. I think this virus has impacted each and every one of us, touched every family in some way or the other. I had my own youngsters, many of them living as PGs in Delhi. Their families were all impacted by it. They themselves were impacted by it. They were working relentlessly because, all the special teams which had been set up by the government to manage the situation from dealing with getting medicines to the oxygen and everything. This was the supporting team for all of them. And these were youngsters. And yet, in the midst of that, remember many of them themselves getting impacted. In fact, we lost a young 26-year-old. She was living as a PG. I know these stories are in every household and then everywhere. But why I'm bringing that to you is that even in the midst of that entire brutality and that crisis, you had everyone, all the stakeholders in the private, public domain getting together and coming up with solutions. I had young guys coming up, startups, coming up with the ventilator solutions that you do not require an ICU ventilator, you require a different kind. And then how could we get a bicycle manufacturer or an automobile manufacturer to tie up with them to get the pieces in place, whatever needed to be imported, how we could get that. I still remember the team working. I got a call one night because we were helping corporates and especially all global corporates to continue with their businesses wherever they could. I got a call of how a youngster in Bangalore had lost his father who was in Noida. And you recollect those days you couldn't move or drive. So this was this little girl. We said, okay, you get onto your car. From Bangalore, she was driving nonstop. And I know my team was on the phone with her without leaving her for a minute. So that every district or every state border she would come to, there would be a call there that please let her go through till we could get her to Delhi. To a young 13-year-old near Nagpur, a cancer patient who required a medicine. So they got the go down opened up in Bombay, got that medicine shifted by a motorcycle guy who drove for 8.5 hours so that this little girl could get the medicine. These are amazing stories. And these are the stories which bring you the strength of this country. You know, the resilience of how all of it get together. I'm sure you all remember, I think third week of March, the WHO global director had said that the impact of this pandemic on the world will depend upon how India manages it. And the fact is, even with the challenges and the numbers, we are all here to talk about it. It was huge. We were just one of the teams working on it. Everybody was working on it. But what were the learnings which came out of it? Before I come to that, and here I must mention, I was this morning in a meeting with the MD of a top German chemical company. You all know the name, it's just that I don't have his approval to be able to share the name with you, but one of the top in the world. In the pandemic, his sales went up from 1.6 billion euros to 2.3 billion euros. India. And I asked him, how did he do it? And you know what was one of the biggest kickers on that one was his plastic ranges, an agriculture-based range. So there were these very interestingly organized business models which could utilize the opportunities which were being created, keeping the continuity cap on to make it happen. And that brings me to the point of what I learned out of this entire thing. One is those MSMEs. The amazing ability of Indian MSMEs. One, frugality. The best utilization of capital ever. Second, the ability to pivot their business models. Overnight, a hosiery maker turned around and was making masks. A plastic molding company, which was for medical devices, within a period of 48 months today, 40% of their turnover is now coming from defense equipment, and another 25% coming from toys. See how they are changing their businesses to meet the new market opportunities which are coming in and to make things happen. From the government side, and this is what really amazed me, the kind of activity which was happening non-stop within the system. Please understand, I haven't had a career in the government. It's just now that I'm working closely with them in the past 7 years. So it was a totally different experience which one was, or an impression which one had before one coming into it. You know, you had a completely new set of industrial policy which was created at this point of time. You had the PLIs, the production linked incentive schemes, which got created in all this time. Let me give you a few instances. 30th March 2020, in the midst of the worst lockdown in human history, we got an FDI of $81 billion, the highest ever FDI in our history. I'll tell you more. Global FDI was going down by 35%. Global FDI was about 1.5 trillion. It came down to 900 billion. We were one of the few countries where the FDI went up. And not just that, we improved our global position on FDI from number 8 to number 5. And please remember, you saw how the global press was treating us. Don't forget that. And more interestingly, this FDI came from 89 countries. 89 countries in the midst of the lockdown invested their money with you. And more interestingly, it came across 63 sectors. Even in the midst of this lockdown, 63 sectors. In fact, 40%, and a lot of new sectors are emerging now. For example, data storage, upcoming sector in a big way. 40% of my entire investment in data storage came in 2020. And that is Greenfield. And you know what was the more interesting thing? Look at my startups. 6 years only down the line, the young startup country. Number 3 in the world in number of unicorns, number 2 in the world in number of startups, and number 1 in the world with new startups adding every day. But I'll tell you what was more interesting. In 2019, no, 2020, we added a unicorn every 30 days. 2021, we added a unicorn every 10 days. And remember, we are in the midst of the most troubling situations, right? And this year, we've added a unicorn every 6 days. Just think of what India has done. Even in this situation, no other example in the world can match it. Give me one more. You guys are a global business. Think about it. Find out if you have any other example where the 63 sectors were impacted, which got higher FDI, and you had 89 countries still bringing in the money for you. Despite whenever anybody do a numbers chart on what was getting impacted, we were right up there, obviously because of the numbers we have. It was an amazing set of examples which was going by. And it always brings me back to that line. It was the worst of times and it was the best of times. The highest adoption rate of digitization in the entire world by the MSMEs happened in India. Global average of digitization rate adoption by MSMEs was anywhere in the 60s. We were close to the 80s, and most of them doing it in the midst of the pandemic. And many of them using it to reduce their costs by over 40%. So the other smart thing which happened, and it's always in the rear view mirror that will we get a better approach of it. There's always something better you could have done. And remember, this pandemic was one where you had no playbook. You did not know what to do next, what was happening next. Actually, we still don't know. Now, every morning there's a question about the fourth wave and the fifth wave or the fifth booster or the sixth booster to do it. The most interesting thing was we kept learning on the way. There may be times we faltered, but we picked ourselves up again and made it happen. And there are numbers to show it. One thing which really stands apart, and I was speaking at a global platform last week when I was traveling, and it was something which astounded me too. The world's largest water program is currently happening in India. You guys should know it. You guys are somewhere or the other, I guess, touched by it. The Prime Minister wants that every individual in India should have a clean drinking water tap in their house. In the midst of this lockdown in the past 36 months, 150 individuals got a drinking water tap in their house. This is the world's largest program, and it means everything, starting from smart water meters to smart taps to water conservation to recycling of water, everything, brown, gray, everything to be happening in this. And all new technologies being brought in. And remember, getting taps and everything going meant that there's a lot of digging and greenfield effort happening. And still it happened. It was amazing. And that is what I saw in my own team of these youngsters. And many of you who I see on the screen fit into that demography. I do not. But I know one thing about my own team. You know, they were working night and day because they were batch of these responsibilities. There were times when oxygen was short in some parts of the country. There were some medicines to be done, medicines to be exported, brought emergency hospitals to be created, everything to be done. I was running short of hands. You know, some of those who left me and had joined elsewhere called back and said, "We are working with the team gratis. Just let us be a part of it." You know, it is amazing human mentality on how, when we are in a crisis that is touching us so deep, yet there are all of us wanting to reach out and help someone or the other. I think this is the biggest strength of us. And I saw this live. Each one of you did it. Think about it. I had some MSMEs which were not letting go of their employees. They said, "Unki salary hum आधा कर देंगे, मतलब whatever, but we will not let them go." Many had to. That was a reality. In how many other countries did this happen? Each one of you on the screen today were not just thinking of yourself, you were thinking how else we can help someone else. We often forget the strength of ours. And there are not too many other situations, peoples, where this may be there, as true as the way it happened. So, yes, guys, all this happened. It was interesting. And I think I've spoken enough, Tarun. I was supposed to speak for 10 minutes, as you had said. I just get carried away when all these things happen. But it's an amazing learning. And the other thing which I've seen now, now that I'm seeing investments, more greenfield investments coming in, because people did not have the time to come and visit earlier. What I'm witnessing is the deleveraging which has happened of our balance sheets. You see, when life was easier, liquidity was more easy, people had picked up, we were all gathering fat. And now that we've been through this and the treadmill approach of it, that fat has gone. As I look at it, you know, I was just doing a quick check and an analysis internally. We were going through, so we were working on that 10 trillion 2030 number. We are 3 trillion today. We're looking at that 10 trillion by 2030, as we all are, all of you are. And, you know, by the way, just to put it in perspective, which I learned, we were the only country in the world which, in a period of 50 months, moved from number 10 to number 5 in the world in the amount of GDP. You jumped ahead of Russia, Italy, Brazil, France, equal to UK because your exchange rate keeps changing. Just imagine these were power joint countries. You powered ahead of them. You went into this pandemic being the fastest growing large economy on the planet. You still are today the fastest growing large economy on the planet. And by everyone's approach, you will remain the fastest growing large economy on the planet. There's something happening right. And it's something being done by all of us. And it is something which is impacting all of us. So maybe it is time that we just stop being a little self-critical, because I think we are the most self-critical society on the planet, which is good in many ways. But at times, and at times like this, it's time to step back and take a pat on your back. It's been tough times, guys, but I think that inflection point is there now. Hopefully, we'll be out of it. Thank you, Chanchal. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bagla, for sharing such interesting, insights with all of us. And it's a privilege to have you with us for this conversation. I have few questions for you, and I would request the audiences to please put their questions they may have for you, and we will take it towards the end. And while you were sharing about your journey, your journey, I mean, of dealing or managing this pandemic for all of us, uh, we have witnessed a lot of disruption, I mean, during these last 2 years. And as I mean, said by one of the greatest author, Mr. Yuval Harari, that the biggest skill you can teach your child in 21st century is to deal with change, to adapt to change, because no amount of learning will help you, because we don't know what is coming next. And this pandemic has taught us that. And what I heard from you, you and your team, what they have achieved during this pandemic, um, the one key aspect which helped us to, cope with this disruption was the mindset change. From a career oriented to the entrepreneurial mindset, which your team, when I was hearing you, which help us as a country to not just navigate, but shine during these tough times. Uh, However, I personally think that it is not easy to achieve this because of the years of conditioning we have, you know. So what are your thoughts and how we can drive this mindset change when, or how do our leaders reframe their approach when it comes to leading in the post-pandemic world?
So let me first start, Chanchal, and very interesting set of points you raised. Exceptional. One is, I think we are a society which is totally tuned into change. You see, necessity is the mother of invention, as they say it. And never do you see necessity more important than in the Indian context. I mean, look at it. Pick up any axis of diversity, any social, economic, political, religion. I mean, and tell me another country which can meet these axes at such extreme levels of diversity. That's your
Yeah.
first point. The moment you have diversity, it forces you into adaptation and adoption. That's the first. The second is a society which is more mobile. The more mobile a society is, the more open it is to change and adoption of change. Let me give you one quick statistic where you will see that. Take a guess. Let's pick up 2019, which was a normal year. Tell me how many people traveled on Indian Railways in 2019? Or how many tickets were sold in 2019? So that means officially, how many people traveled on India Railways? Why I'm bringing you this figure? Because migration gives you the idea of how open-minded a society is. You want to take a guess, Chanchal? We are a population of 1.3 billion. Take any wild number.
I'm sorry. I actually, I mean, don't even want to attempt because I'm really not sure about it. Yeah.
We've got Sunil here. Sunil, how many tickets?
I was just trying to guess. I never knew that it will come to me, but maybe around 50 million, possibly.
50 million.
Yeah.
Okay, let me give you the answer. 8 billion tickets. And these are tickets. I'm not talking जो ऊपर बैठते हैं साथ पे लटके हुए हैं. That is a big number by itself. Let me give you another number which will show you how fast you as a society are changing. We all agree that data is the new oil,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Now, per capita data consumption, let's be fair. Let's not do a total data consumption multiplied by 1.3. We'll outstrip every country in the world. Per capita data consumption, 2018 end or 2019 early, our ranking globally was about 122 or 123. What do you think was that ranking early last year? Rajdeep,
Uh, should be in the top five now. I think it could be number two, number three.
Sunil, number one in the world. You used more per capita data than China and the US put together. Let me give you two other statistics. Every minute, non-stop, the clock doesn't stop ever, right? Every minute, 30 people are moving from a village to a city in India, not to travel, to relocate. By the end of this decade, you would have created another United States of America. You would have had 350 million people move from your rural and semi-rurals to an urban township. Why I'm giving you these points? Let me give you another last one. We are about what, 700 million on the net, 750? We are the second largest on the net. We are the largest not yet on the net. Every second, 3 new people are joining the net in India, 2 of them from a village. Every second. If you ask me, we are at the bottom around of that hockey stick and the inflection point and ready to take off on the vertical string. This story has only just begun. And these are the points, Chanchal, which brings you to your question. Why is it that we are one of the highest on adoption and adaptation of technology and change in the world? And I'll tell you the other interesting element. So, 2019 October, of the top 3 private equity funds of the world, मुझे 3 इसलिए बोलने पड़ रहे हैं क्योंकि मेरे पास अभी उसका अप्रूवल नहीं. उसका जो the person, the man who founded that, one of the richest people in the world, who gets an annual salary of anywhere between 1 billion or 1.5 billion. He had come to India and he said, we'll come to the City Invest India office for an hour and we want to meet some startups. So he came to our office. All his day meetings were cancelled. We had called 22 startups to meet him. He spent 6 hours in the office, came to me from my conference room in my office, had invested his personal money in 5 of our startups in that 5 hours. He said, Mr. Bagla, what I liked about your startups was that they gave me solutions which are not just for the top 500 million of the world's population, but for the balance 7 billion of the world's population, and they're very easily scalable. And you know why that happens? Today in my startup India, for me, this was the most heartening point when I evaluate our team's ability or whatever they've done. Out of the 739 districts in India, over 650 of them have a registered startup. The fastest growing startups in India sectors are coming from T2, T3 cities. And women-led startups are coming from there. They're coming from the Mogas of the world, from the Ernakulums of the world. And this is where the movement has happened. The growth of New India is no longer going to be restricted to those 10, 12 metro centers. It's now bottom up from each and every village and small town. It is unbelievable what is happening in this country. And why I'm giving you this instance, because it takes me back to your question, Chanchal. The problems or challenges faced in those small towns will be very different from those which you face in Bombay and Delhi. That's point number one. And the solutions which you will come up with are going to be totally different in those villages and towns because the contours available for them to create those solutions are very different from the ones you get here. That is the strength. You have business solutions coming out, and that is all what the future is about. It is about that solution to every issue. And when I look at this team which I have, and I told you average age 30, if you keep me out of it, it goes up. So I always keep myself out when the calculating of that age. It's a very strong can-do attitude. Everything, it is not ki ye kya hoga. It is ye kaise hoga. That how can we make it happen? That is an enormous strength. It's the mindset. And remember, because you mentioned about a specific author, one of the points which he made is that war and peace is made in the minds of men and not by pen stroke of generals. I'm also bringing it into context with what is happening currently. But that is where solutions are created in life, in the minds of men and women. And I think in every society, in every country, there's a cycle of life and every individual's life. And in that circle, there was a time when we were on the top. And as I see it, the time has come, we move that circle, and you're seeing us retain that position yet again in life. As a country, as a nation, as a society, and very clearly as individuals. Back to you, Chachil.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Bagla. Um, and I guess this can-do attitude has really helped us, as an organization, of course, but as a nation, when we hearing these stories from you and this, I mean, whatever you're sharing with us, it's really remarkable. And a few of my colleagues have shared their emotions, what they are feeling right now. I mean, the immense pride they have being part of this country. So my next question, I mean, on the same lines I have, since I heard a lot of, a lot of time from you about the startups, because culture and the way we have worked during this pandemic, what I hear from you. Um, it was with a lot of nimbleness. I mean, you shared that initially when the lockdown was announced, we didn't have PPE kit, and the entire ecosystem came together to not just, I would say, fulfill the requirement we had as a country, but we were also exporting us. So it was the nimbleness and the agility with which we I would say, came together, and it helped us to sail through that crisis at that time. What are your thoughts on adoption of this attitude or this way of working, this mentality in a matured software services organization like ours? Because I guess that's the need of the hour when we are, going through so much of disruption.
It's very interesting you say that because I just saw a comment by Mishti that most of these startups are not profitable. And Mishti, you're absolutely right. You know, Darwin has a very exclusive theory of life, and we all have to live by it. And in many ways, it makes sense to have that theory because, though ideally in a utopian situation, and for me, I would love it if each one of them is a unicorn, but it takes time. Every idea has a value, but it uh, timing is very critical to see the value of that idea because time brings circumstances, and every idea is circumstance effective. So it will take a little time. Will I say that all 100% of them will be profitable? It will not. It also depends a lot upon how resilient you are, how you keep at it, and how you create your business models around it. There's a lot of learning. But coming back to the point, Chanchal, we are living in a very interesting set of times. Anything is possible, but nothing is certain. Think about it. Everything is possible, right? Nothing is certain for you. The problem which we are all facing, and more so for people in my generation than yours, is that everything is a moving part in our life today. So the number of variables you have to bring into a decision making are exponential. Luckily for you, you have all your good software models and all those be able to do it. My generation did not do it as well. I do it hopelessly. So we get more overwhelmed by it. All what I was trying to say that societies and economies which are based on similar constructs like ours, which is complexity, which is diversity, which is based on challenges, have a greater ability to move into the new world order, where there will be solutions being asked for at every point of time. Now, the biggest challenge which organizations which have existed for a while, which is happening, is their ability to be nimble. By definition, any organization, can you hear me, guys? It says that check your internet connection and try rejoining. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
We
can
can
hear
hear you. Yes, please.
They typically say that the first inflection point of an organization is when it crosses 350 employees, plus minus whatever, because that's when your informal structures have to become into more structured scenarios. This next big jump is when it crosses 1,200 employees, because then you become more ossified. And then after that, it becomes like a big jigsaw, which each one is a small cog. Now, the moment it gets into that format, the ability to be nimble becomes very difficult. Organizations which are nimble, if you have to ask me only on one thing which is required, it is nimble. For example, when we created Invest India as an organization structure, and if I look at an architectural example for it, we created it a house with no walls inside. That means it could change its shape given the dynamics of what was required by the marketplace. So I'm trying all the time to see that I do not have verticals, even though I have them, but how do I keep puncturing them so that they work with others? The new world order is one about being nimble, and second, most importantly, the ability to join the dots. And the challenge, Chanchal, is the number of those dots are increasing exponentially by the day.
Yes.
And if you cannot join those dots, you are gone. This is not just about an organization, this is about us as individuals. You know, in many ways, I'm very lucky. I'm now in my retirement phase. So I will just be giving up the world and reading a book at home. And obviously, I don't play golf, so not that exciting. But for the youngsters coming in, and that is what I keep telling the team here, none of you will be into careers which are going to be the same career for your life. None. You will be constantly reskilling yourself, which you hear from everyone. But more importantly is that ability to join dots. And let me tell you, even though there is a lot of discussion about the importance of interpersonal skills, people skills, I personally think I'm seeing people with the right attitude, which also includes public people skills, are the ones which are being able to join the dots more effectively than others. Similarly, organizations which were very straight-jacketed, I'll give you an example. For example, banks, very straight-jacketed organization. If you join a corporation, it was expected that you will wear the suit of the same color, of the same tie, or whatever it was. You now need to forget all that. These are those small things, the ability of people to move beyond and to think beyond. So these are truly the most challenging times. I wish I could give you solutions, but to my mind, there aren't any, except the right attitude.
Very nicely summed up, Mr. Bagla. So for me, some of the takeaways are can-do attitude, connecting the dots, nimbleness, and yes, most importantly, the right attitude. Well, I have
And
more questions.
one more, Chanchal,
Yeah.
and a strong cup of black coffee to keep
Ah,
yourself awake.
okay. We would surely love to host, you in our office, Mr. Bagla, for a cup of coffee whenever you have time and availability. We'd love to do that.
And Chanchal, a cup of nice French coffee. So let me also put it like that.
No, no, no. Listen, this I have to correct. Okay. So, we have a very interesting program, what we are doing, and this is the Prime Minister's initiative. So it's called ODOP, one district, one product. So the team is picking up one product from each district in India and creating it as an export product. For example, I'll give you an example. And only because we've just come out of the pandemic, our haldi milk is a wonder thing now. By the way, I hope you're all having it. Okay. And even if you're laughing at me that this old fellow is telling you, believe you in me, every medicinal thought in the world has now come back to a turmeric latte, or take that turmeric in the morning with a little bit of coconut oil. But now, why did I say this? The best turmeric in the world is from Lakadong in India, in Northeast. Turmeric average globally, what is it called in it? Cumin, cumin. The cumin content is about 3 to 3.5%, while our Lacodong has 8% cumin content. Now, the problem which was happening is that by the time we could get it from the farmer to the manufacturing or to the processing plant, it was taking about 36 hours. It used to dry up and that it used to dry down and that percentage used to come down. So just last month, the team has got the solution. My team from Agni, which is curcumin, that's right, Margot. Monica, you're right. That's what I was looking for. That team has found, so my Agni team, which is the innovation team, has now got drones which are picking it up directly from the farmer and bringing it to the processing site within 2 hours. And then we are processing it and now exporting it. Now, why am I telling you this? Was from your comment on coffee, that similarly, the most expensive coffee in the world is now going to be coming from India. It's coming from the south. And what had happened is they were drying the coffee beans on on the mitti, basically, on the soil. So it used to have an aftertaste. So we got the feedback from the French, and they said the aftertaste is what is creating a problem. So we've cemented those areas. It is now being exported to France. They are loving it, and it will now be the most expensive coffee in the world. Back to you, Chanchal.
That's very interesting fact, Mr. Bagla. So as I said, I do have more questions for you, but I have my team members here who are asking questions. So maybe I can go to Rajdeep. Rajdeep, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Chanchal, for organizing this connect. It's amazing to hear Mr. Deepak here. Um, I'm so proud to hear all the facts that you have put in. Really, I have just two questions that comes to my mind as of now. One is, related to the patenting process. It's a very complex process of patenting, and with startups coming in, the ideas needs to get patented as soon as possible. So, are we doing something on that line? That's my first question. So, if you want, I'll let you answer, and then I will ask my next one.
So Rajdeep, we came up with that new. Why is it okay now? Yeah. So we came up with a new IPR policy, which everybody loves as a policy. Now it is enforcement of that policy and the patents, which is we are working on now a little better. There's a lot of training being involved of all stakeholders, including the police, including the judiciary, and everywhere that is happening. The other thing is that I don't know if you've noticed, the pendency has dropped enormously. What used to take anywhere between 3 years earlier has been brought down to 6 months. So that capacity creation within the organization to make it happen is all happening. So this is an absolutely critical pillar for us as we move into our new growth point. I don't know if you know this, but today India is the number one R&D destination in the world. In the past 60 months, we've opened 1,048 R&D centers of global multinationals in India. I'm the number one R&D destination for global multinationals having their R&D center outside of their head office. Otherwise, it used to be a very head office oriented positioning. And the core point of that is this entire point which you have raised. So there's a lot of effort, lot of policy making effort, lot of outreach, lot of educational effort being happening on this one. And I think we have started seeing some good results. I've also started seeing some positive feedback globally on the entire effort which has been put in by the government. And this remains one of the top objectives that we want to create ourselves as a very credible nation where innovation and R&D is concerned.
Thank you, sir. There is one more point related to patent. Actually, that U.S. patent is considered to be the world's most, how do I say it, most recognized, or where you can get all, yeah, most recognized. But are we also, from India patent perspective, going to have some kind of connect with them to see that whatever patent we are doing gets similar privilege as per the U.S. patent?
So those discussions are on, as you know, Rajdeep, and there are multiple things. But let me also tell you, one of the things which we are trying to work on, and like everything else which we do, the learnings from elsewhere is very good. One of the big challenges on the patent industry part is that it takes you about 5 to 6 to 7 years to get a patent. And by that time, it's no longer valid as a technology because of the obsolescence which is happening. It's trying to hold a falling knife and it will always fall on your foot and make you bleed. So what we are now trying also to see, how can we bring and shorten that time? Number two, you cannot have patents any longer for 20 years. वो नहीं चल रहा. Because you may continue with that patent, but the technology is changed and taken on completely. So the way life is changed and the way pace is coming in, this will have to be relooked at in a multiple ways. And I think that is where a lot of learnings which are happening globally, what the shortcomings are in some of the other countries. We are trying to bring a resolution to all of that and trying to come up with some solutions which will benefit all of you. Very important point you brought. And this is truly a focal point for everyone in the system.
Okay, thank you, sir. My next point is about the concept of unicorn bubble or the startup bubble that is becoming really reality also in some terms, because the venture capitalists are investing and trying to encash on their investments and move to the next investment, and this is causing a kind of a bubble which is there in the system today. Are we planning to put some kind of checks and balances around that?
It's a very interesting point you raised, Rajdeep, and it is not just about unicorns. It's about where do you want the government to limit its involvement in your life? Do you want them to come in? Think about it. They'd love to. I mean, I don't know if you read an article in The Economist about 6 or 7 issues ago, how governance is now taking back and becoming larger, government as a concept. There is a free market which is to be working in it. And I mean, there are arguments on every side of it. There is a bubble. Yes, there is a bubble. There is a euphoric situation which happens every time. And there is an excitement which is created. But at the same point of time, people are smart. Some of them are taking the risk on wanting to do things, right? It's a risk reward scenario. So the person who's parting with his money is not absolutely stupid. Everybody has a certain part in their portfolio which is on that high risk, high reward scenario, right? If that money is coming into this, what is the problem? They know what they are wanting to do with their money. They are willing to take the risk. And there is somebody who's put his life on his idea and wanting to make it happen. The chances are it may not happen. It happens all the time in life. You may fall in love with somebody, it may not work out. It's similar. So I still am a liberal at heart who believes that maybe the market itself is a good determinant of this, and we should let them learn by their own faults.
Okay. I hope that answers your question, Rajdeep. Okay. So in interest of time, we'll take one more question. We have question from Usha, Mr. Bagla. Usha, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Chanchal. Thank you, Mr. Bagla. So this session has been, really, really inspiring. So my question was more on the failures, right? Because I think somewhere we've all grown up with that failure being considered as bad, and somewhere I think that's programmed into us. So I just wanted to, hear from you, according to you, you've got so much of experience behind you. What are some of your strategies or recommendations to learn from the failures?
It's so interesting you bring that up. I remember when we were launching Startup India on January 16, 2016, and they had a number of VIPs on the stage which were going to be speaking. And we were preparing the talking points for one of them. And I said, sir, I think what we've got to tell the people that this will succeed only when we start celebrating failure. Now, I know celebrating failure, maybe taking it to a different level, but not just acceptance of failure, but taking it as a reality of life. And I think as India is moving up the economic ladder, the ability to take risk is inversely proportional to your ability to accept failure, right? Now, as you grow up the economic chart, your ability to take risk becomes higher. Am I being very abstract? So let me put it in perspective. By 2030, 80% of India will be in the middle class. By 2040, 93% of India will be middle class. That means you have moved up the economic ladder. Your ability to take the risk is higher. And automatically, your ability to accept failure is going to be lower. I mean, did you ever think? I remember when I started my job at Citibank, and they used to go to hire. So they used to go to IIM Ahmedabad day one. They used to make the offer to the top 20 people there, and 19 of them used to accept, and it used to be closed out. Now, if any of these organizations would go, they will not get anybody in the top 100. The top 80 of them are starting their own startups. The world has changed. And I totally agree with you. It's that acceptance of failure with the ability that not only anything you learn from it. I mean, I've just been through failures right through my life. So you can say when you said that, I have a lot of experience, maybe that's what you're alluding to. But yes, it's one of the best learners, but it is difficult. And it is difficult if you have limited opportunities. But ideally, what is happening with India today, opportunities abound for all of you. And that makes it much easier. And that takes us to 3:58 p.m. Chanchal, so it's back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I hope that answers your question, Usha.
Yeah, Chanchal, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Bagla. Well explained. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So we can go on and on, but I'm sure Mr. Bagla has other engagements too. But as all thing comes to an end, this session has also come to an end. And now I would like to invite the person who led innumerable changes during these disruptive times within our organization, which just not enabled us to, I would say work, but rise and shine during these times. Our chief mentor, Mr. Sunil Goyal. Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you, Chanchal, and thank you to all the participants who've been here. And I can confidently say that people who did not attend the session, they have missed something really, really big, because the last 60 or 59 minutes were absolutely mesmerizing. Something where obviously getting up from the chair was not possible, because the kind of things Mr. Bagla has spoken about. I mean, I pride myself in terms of knowing India, because I decided to stay back in India after my graduation. But I think I did not know 90% of what you spoke. And I think we need to know all this. Obviously, there were a lot of leadership lessons around it. And uh, uh, actually, my daughter also worked with Invest India for 2 years, and she was part of this journey which you spoke about. So I can firsthand say that what you spoke was absolutely, absolutely what your team was going through, the way they did things. But yeah, I know. I think 59 minutes were too less to know everything what we would like. But really, really thank you from bottom of my heart for sparing your one valuable hour with us. It was absolutely amazing for all the people. I just hope, I mean, I know that's a paradox for me, whether I should say that after hearing you, some of my people should start a startup, or because obviously then I lose good employees, or they should do a good startup and contribute to the Indian economy even more. But let's see. I can proudly say that I've had at least 10 to 12 entrepreneurs who have left me and did their startups, and they're doing pretty well. So, but thank you very much for your time. I know your schedule is always power packed. It's very, very difficult to get time, but thanks for spending that 1 hour with us. I'm sure all the 170 people who have attended it have gained a lot from it. But thank you very much. It was absolutely, absolutely amazing.